Somehow I got to figure out how to get all this stuff inside the engine compartment of my pocket trawler.
Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to MotorCity Boat Works. Let's get to work. Welcome back to my shop. The boat behind me is a 1986 Albin 27 family cruiser. It's a 27-foot diesel pocket trawler. I'm restoring it back from a bare hull. Over the last couple of months, I've reached phase 2 of this boat building project. Phase 2 is where I'm going to be putting in all of the components, all the systems and everything back into the boat. If you haven't already seen the episodes where I talk about what the components are going to be, what kind of items I'm going to be choosing to put inside the boat, well, make sure you check out those episodes. If you haven't already noticed, I do some things differently on my YouTube channel than what you might see elsewhere. I like to take you through all the steps and tips and tricks, all the nuances about doing some of these projects when you're trying to do an amateur boat restoration or an amateur boat build. A lot of this content is very detailed. It's very how-to. It can be a little bit dense. I encourage you to sit through the videos, maybe take a break here or there. I hope you stick with me. This episode is going to be the first in a series of videos where I talk about putting in the tanks inside the Albin 27. The tanks are the first step in putting in the components because they're one of the largest items that has to go back into the boat. They're important because they're going to determine where the plumbing system is going to go and how the electrical system is going to be laid around that. This episode is going to be the beginning about how I put tanks in my pocket trawler. Back in the shop today, it's really hot outside. It's the middle of June and it's running about 85 degrees outside with some high humidity.
I want to apologize because you're going to hear some humming or maybe a low droning sound in the background. That's the very large fans that I have going, bringing in fresh air into the shop, trying to keep the air circulating and cool it down a little bit. So I apologize in advance for the sound in the background.
Well, we're working in the Boat Works today, and what I'm going to be doing is making some pink foam mock-ups of various components that I'm going to be buying and installing into the Albin 27 pocket trawler. These are going to include things like eventually the brand new diesel engine, the water and the waste tanks, the lithium batteries, the refrigerator that's going to go inside the galley of the boat. I have rough dimensions that I've been able to research online and talk to the various vendors and suppliers, but what I really want to see is what these items are going to look like inside the spaces that I have. I want to make sure everything fits. It can be hard to kind of imagine what a space is going to look like once it's filled up with these large items. Some of them are 3 feet long, maybe 2 or 3 feet wide. I need to get an idea of how everything looks once it's put inside the boat. The best way to do that is to make some pink foam mock-ups. Basically a bunch of cubes and rectangles that I'll be able to put together, kind of show you what it's going to look like.
Now, I've talked about the pink foam method before. Basically, it's half-inch pink foam insulation panels. You can cut them up and use them to do shapes, bulkheads, and various things when you're designing your boat. When you're doing this type of mock-up, it's extremely important to have very accurate measurements, transfer those very accurately to the foam. Everything should be as close to the finished reality as possible. That's the only way to know whether or not things are going to actually fit.
These items cost hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. And before I start purchasing them, well, I want to make sure what they're going to look like inside the boat. In addition, this is going to tell me maybe where I need to put certain fittings for the plumbing, how I'm going to get access to everything. This is all part of the design process.
If you look at a top-down view of the engine compartment, on the port side, there's going to be the water tank. On the starboard side, it's going to be the waste tank. In the middle of the engine compartment is the new diesel engine. Just to the left of the diesel engine is going to be the house battery bank. This is going to be the 500 amp hours of lithium batteries. The battery that starts the engine and the battery that runs the stern thruster, those are going to go to the right of the engine. And in addition to all this stuff, various pumps and filters and the exhaust system for the engine, all that has to go, kind of around this space attached to the bulkhead or kind of squeezed in every nook and cranny.
So what I've got here is I've gone ahead and made some notes. I pulled stuff off online. We've got the refrigerator, we've got the engine, we've also got the larger size engine. I've got the water tanks. It's going to be two exact same tanks, one for waste, one for water. This is most important for the tanks because I'm trying to put in the largest tanks possible to get the maximum tankage possible, but I don't want to have custom tanks made. I want to try and use what's available, try and save some money, and I want to see basically what it looks like. We're going to take this, transfer it to the pink foam, and kind of tape together these boxes. All right, here we go. Two 45-gallon tanks. One will be waste, one will be fresh water. I suppose the next thing is to go up there and see how they fit inside the boat and make sure everything's good. I think this is really going to help me figure out where I want the placement of the fill fittings and all this kind of stuff. So it goes underneath that. All right. Ha! Well, that goes right in. Ha ha!
Hey, I just want to take a moment to thank all of our supporters and fans, all of our subscribers, and those of you who are supporting us on Patreon. If you're new to the channel and you're just now checking us out, the single most important thing that you can do is hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend about MotorCity Boat Works. This channel would not be possible without your support. Thank you.
Somehow I got to figure out how to get all this stuff inside the engine compartment of my pocket trawler. All right, this one is an example of what the 12-volt refrigerator is going to look like. It's going to sit on top of the refrigerator stand. There may be some sort of enclosure that goes around it. It will depend on which model refrigerator I eventually pick out. We'll do a separate episode on that. You can get an idea of what it looks like in the forward cabin of the boat. And this is what the engine compartment looks like once all of the items are actually put inside there. The mock-up gives you an idea of how crowded everything is.
I did this because I wanted to make sure that everything would fit and also get an idea about how much room there was to move around and where maybe other components are going to be able to be mounted. Fuel filters and water pumps and this kind of stuff.
Right off the bat, I learned three things doing this experiment. The first one was that there was some question about the size of the engine, and we now know that we have plenty of room and can choose from a variety of engines that might be offered. The second thing we learned is that there's plenty of room for the battery capacity. We'll be able to get the 500 amps in there, no problem, plus the extra batteries for the starting and the stern thruster. The third thing I learned is that I need a different configuration for the waste tank because there's actually more room on the starboard side of the boat. The tank dimensions can be different. They don't have to be the same as the water tank. This will free up some extra space on the bulkhead for the pumps, filters, and all sorts of things. So what this means is I'm going to end up going with two different tanks. There'll be two different sizes.
So let's take a minute to do a little Tank 101. The tanks that you put inside your boat build, your RV, or your off-grid living, those are usually made of plastic. They're some type of polypropylene. They're roto-molded.
Some of these tanks come with the fittings and the openings already positioned inside the tank. Sometimes you can order what's called a blank tank and then tell the manufacturer where you'd like the fittings to be and what their size should be. Of course, you can have a custom tank made, but they're like 3 times more expensive than tanks that are already being manufactured. Many of these companies offer a variety of sizes, all sorts of configurations, things that they already have molds for. On many of these ready-made tanks, you're able to choose the placement of the fittings and their sizes, so you end up with a tank that's kind of semi-custom at a reasonable price.
It turns out that if you do a little research, most of the plastic tanks come from just a handful of companies in North America. There's lots of companies that are selling the tanks, but it turns out they're resellers or distributors. One of my principles of boat restoration is to try and source your parts from the manufacturer or from wholesale. You want to try and cut out the middleman. One of the most well-known tank manufacturers is a company called Ronco Plastics. They're recommended on all the boating forums and on the Facebook groups. All the experts say they're the place to get your tanks. So that's what I decided to do. But before you can order your tanks, you got to figure out where your fittings are going to go and what type they're going to be so that the manufacturer can basically make the tank to your specifications. If you're like me, you're probably wondering, how do you figure out what the fittings are, what type they should be before you order your tank? It turns out to answer this question, you've got to have a pretty good understanding of how the plumbing system works on a boat. I spent some time combing through my personal library, books on boat building, reading articles online, perusing all of the boat building forums and Facebook boat building groups, trying to get a very good understanding of what the standards were for the fittings, what were the common sizes, and the best practices for putting together a plumbing system. It was challenging. Facebook and some of the internet forums is not the best place to get really good comprehensive information. A lot of it is outdated, and frankly, there are some well-meaning individuals who just don't know what they're talking about. All of the salty dog experts recommended that I purchased a book called Getting Rid of Your Boat Odors. It's written by a woman named Peggy Hall. Online, she goes by the name The Head Mistress. This book is supposedly the gold standard on how to reduce odors on your boat, but also how to go ahead and put together and maintain a proper marine sanitation system. To me, I would give this book 1 out of 5 stars. The book is just over 90 pages. It's about 30,000 words. Over 1/3 of the book, more than 30 pages, are nothing more than part schematics with the blow-up diagram on how submarine toilets are put together. Basically, this information is all available free, and it comes from the manufacturers. This book and most of the online forums also put out a lot of information that's really, frankly, outdated. A lot of the information applies to people who are retrofitting their older boats, and they're not changing out the entire system. They're just trying to replace one tiny component at a time to get a little more life out of the system. In my opinion, if you're building a boat from scratch or you're refitting your trawler or sailboat with a new plumbing system, this information is all but almost worthless.
Huh?
Why? Because all of this information is available online, and most of it is available from the manufacturers of the actual plumbing system components themselves. The manufacturers who make the marine toilets, who make the marine hoses, they all have their own kind of DIY information and encyclopedia articles that will tell you just about everything you need to know. It's a lot of information you got to get through. You may as well get it from a good source rather than someone repeating something secondhand online, or worse, telling you something that just doesn't apply today. I'll give you a good example. I was trying to figure out what should the hose fitting be from my marine toilet to the marine tank. What size is that hose going to be? That'll tell me what size the fitting should be. All of these sources online, Facebook, even inside this book tell you that you should choose 1.5 inches for your marine hoses and therefore have a corresponding fitting that's that large. The reality is that a modern marine macerating toilet, they don't use 1.5-inch hoses anymore. They use 1 inch. Why? Because it has to do with efficiency, and it has to do with being able to run a smaller diameter hose back to the tank no matter how far you pretty much have to go. This allows a marine toilet to kind of flush itself with a higher velocity of the water going through a tinier hose. Now, you might say, oh, well, what if your hose is going to get clogged? 1 inch doesn't seem very large, but remember, we're talking about a marine electric macerating toilet, a toilet that has a macerator built into it, and it runs off of electricity.
The macerator chops up the waste and basically turns everything into a liquid slurry. And that is what's forced through the hoses.
We'll get into all the details on the new toilet down the road. We'll cover that in another episode. My point in bringing this up is to remind you that it's worth thinking critically about some of the information that you might find on these forums online. You have to match your components to your system and really think through the steps. So now let's talk about the fittings I'm going to have installed in my new tanks. At a minimum, a tank will have an in and an out and usually a vent. You may also have some sort of internal sensor or even an inspection hatch. I've made the decision not to include inspection hatches primarily because the hatches themselves are usually only 3 to 6 inches, which doesn't allow enough room to actually clean the tanks anyway. Normal preventive maintenance for the tanks should give plenty of life. In order to know how full the tanks are, you've got to have some sensors. And I've made the decision to use some internal sensors. They'll go inside the tank and they'll give me an electronic reading on how full they are. They don't have any mechanical parts. These sensors require a 1-inch MPT threaded fitting in order to screw down inside the tank. When you order these blank tanks, the manufacturer will usually put in a combination of fittings on the top or the sides of the tank. They use a process called spin welding. Basically, threaded fittings are plastic welded to the top of the plastic tank.
Looks like we've got about 5 to 6 inches clearance in each access point. So that should mean that we have plenty of room to connect the fittings and get, gentle curve of the hose to go up to vent lines, what have you. So we got a vent, we got the sensor, we got the water tank out, that's right there, that's pretty good. And we got the fill, which is right here. This is the third dry fit for the Mockup tanks. What I've done is I've gone ahead and I've marked them on top with the various size of the fittings that are going to be on there. When I put the tank up inside the engine compartment, I want to be able to check from over here from the access point to see, can I get access to everything? This is kind of the final go around. All right, we can see everything. This looks pretty good. We got the vent, we got the sensor, we got one of the pump outs, the second pump out, and the other hose is over there, which probably we can't reach. I'm just really nervous ordering these very expensive tanks. They're going to be, $500-600 a piece. I got to order 2 of them. And I'm worried that, having the fittings put in the wrong place or not thinking of something, or worse, not being able to fit these things up inside here after the fact. It could be a very expensive mistake. This process and this information that I've learned from doing the tank project on my pocket trawler has caused me to wonder why no one has ever bothered to kind of document this and really explain what's going on. I've decided to go ahead and make some very detailed notes, and I'm going to put it out there for other people who are building their boats or maybe doing their own boat refit. I'm going to make all of this information available to the workers. That's the channel fan club over on Patreon. All you have to do is go over and sign up for Patreon. Sometimes I make things available to all the workers, but if you contribute to the channel, you definitely get access to my notebook and all of my detailed notes. Now at this stage, I've got a good drawing and good measurements that shows all the components of the tanks. That's been sent off to the tank manufacturer, and now I just have to wait for the tanks to be made and shipped to me. They're telling me that it'll be about 4 weeks, so we'll wait and see what happens. In the meantime, I'm just about ready to start painting the Skipper 20 sailboat. Hopefully we can get that done before the end of the summer, and we'll be back into the boat works working on the components as things become available. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, be sure to subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button. You can leave a comment below, and you can contact me at my email, which is on the homepage of the YouTube channel or on the website for MotorCity Boat Works. I want to thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated.